Does your life feel confusing for no obvious reason? Maybe you feel like you're lacking clarity and direction, a sense of disconnection, maybe even questioning your path. You know that there's something more, but you just can't quite access it right now. If that feels familiar, I get it. And this video is to explain what's happening and how to transform your life now. David, William, Pierce, welcome back. I've been studying classical tantric teachings for over 6 years now, because when I first found them, they seemed to explain things that I was already experiencing but hadn't fully managed to articulate. They didn't ask me to believe something new, but instead helped me understand something that I was already living. And my intention with this series of transmissions is simply to pass that understanding forwards. Not to convince you of anything, but to offer you a lens through which you might better understand your own experience. Because sometimes clarity doesn't come from finding new answers, but from finally understanding the question. This week's studies explore the fourth and fifth acts of consciousness. The fourth is Tirudana, concealment, and the fifth, Anugraha, grace. And together they explain one of the deepest mysteries of human experience. Why do we forget who we are? And more importantly, how can we remember? Most spiritual teachings focus heavily on awakening. They talk about enlightenment, truth, freedom, awareness, and realization, which Tantra also speaks into. But Tantra does something different. It asks a different question. Before we ask how awakening happens, we first ask, why did forgetting happen at all? If consciousness is this infinite intelligence, why would it ever conceal itself from itself? Why would reality create the experience of separation and limitation, confusion and suffering? The answer Tantra gives is as complex to understand as it is beautiful to appreciate. Consciousness can only experience itself in a particular form by temporarily forgetting everything that it is not. So to put it another way, for consciousness to have become you, it needed to temporarily stop being everything else. For the infinite to become limited, concealment is necessary. And so self-forgetting is not a mistake. It is just part of the creative process itself. The teachings describe reality as pure consciousness expressing itself into form. But expression requires limitation. An actor can only play a role by temporarily forgetting who they are. A musician can only play one note by not playing all of the other notes simultaneously. And a wave can only become a wave by appearing separate from the ocean. So concealment becomes part of the creative act itself. The divine forgets itself so that it may experience itself through a unique perspective, your perspective. And that forgetting becomes what we experience as individuality. So much of human suffering feels like forgetting our worth, our connection, our nature, forgetting that we belong. And perhaps you've experienced this yourself, moments where you feel disconnected from yourself and don't know why. Moments where life feels heavy and confusing, but you lose sight of something essential. The challenge is that when we don't see the whole picture, we naturally suffer. We interpret temporary circumstances as permanent truths, confusing a passing experience with our actual identity. We mistake a single chapter of the whole story, and because we don't see beyond the limitation of concealment, we believe the concealment is reality itself. We believe the limitation, the fear, the contraction. We get lost in the chapter we're in instead of stepping back to witness the entire story that we're a part of. But Tantra says something here, that forgetting is not the end of the story, because concealment is always balanced by another movement, grace. Grace is not a reward. In tantric teaching, it's not something earned through moral perfectionism or reserved for special people. It's natural, the natural movement of remembering. Grace is consciousness revealing itself to itself once again. The act of forgetting is followed by the act of remembering. Contraction followed by expansion. Separation followed by reconciliation. Many of us have built identities around that forgetting. The man who isn't enough, who feels abandoned, the one who never quite fits in and keeps struggling, keeps searching. And over time, those identities can begin to feel true. But Tantra suggests that these identities are not the deepest layer of who you are. They're simply the layer that concealment created. In Tantra, grace doesn't destroy your individuality. It reveals its deeper context. You don't have to stop being you. You simply have to begin to recognize yourself as something far greater than that limited version you've believed yourself to be. The wave remembers that it is the ocean without ceasing to be a wave. And this is a huge part of the work I do through men's transformational yoga, helping men navigate major life or relationship transitions to rebuild self-trust, clarity, and grounded direction. Many men feel disconnected from themselves. I know I have, because of pressure, uncertainty, relationship challenge, career transition. These identity shifts often are the issue, but it's not that there's something wrong. It's that life is trying to evolve you beyond a version of yourself you're still holding on to, and that's why we suffer. The work isn't about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you are beneath the confusion to then build what it is that you desire on top of that. So if something in that speaks to you, head to the link in the description for more. So one of the most beautiful lines in this week's study from Harish's Tantra Illuminated is that grace is fundamentally an act of reconciliation, that it follows opening. As soon as we make space within ourselves for a greater reality, grace begins to move in and fill it. This means awakening isn't something to force, but something that we become available for. That as soon as we make space within our hearts, the power of grace moves in to fill the vacuum. The movement may be subtle. Life exhausts us, the old ways that once supported us stop working, the things that once satisfied can no longer do it for us, and eventually we begin to ask deeper questions. And maybe this is where you're at right now. Not because you're failing, but because you're becoming ready for a larger reality, for a greater truth. You're ready to remember who you truly are. Contraction is not the opposite of expansion. It is often the precursor to expansion. The forgetting creates the conditions for remembering, the concealment, the conditions for revelation. And what feels like being lost may simply just be part of the process. Sometimes the path is not about finding yourself. Sometimes it's about remembering what was never truly lost. And this changes the way that we relate to difficulty, because confusion then becomes part of the journey, not evidence of failure. Transition becomes part of the process, not evidence that something has gone wrong. The question becomes less, why is this happening to me? And more, what might this be preparing me to remember? Preparing for me moving forwards. Because if concealment is part of the divine process, then perhaps your current uncertainty isn't a problem to solve, Perhaps it's a doorway, life inviting you into a larger understanding of yourself, rather than God abandoning you. This fifth act of grace, of remembering and reconciliation, is the act through which you as an individual can recognize yourself as a complete and perfect expression of the whole already. You're not separate from reality. You are simply reality expressing itself uniquely as you, through you, and for the benefit of all beings. So this week's contemplation is this: where in your life are you currently experiencing concealment? Where do you feel confused or disconnected, uncertain or lost? And what if that experience isn't evidence that something has gone wrong, but is actually the evidence for the invitation of a deeper remembering? If you'd like to go deeper into this week's teaching, there is a full quiz linked in the description, and you can get the access to the answers for free just using the link that's also there. So thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next transmission. Cheers.